Welcome to Expand Your Empire, the podcast where women stop deferring wealth and start building financial power. I'm Amanda Taylor, investor, strategist, and disruptor of outdated money rules. It's time to own your worth, grow your assets, and build a legacy that lasts.
So I want to talk about a decision-making problem today, not a feelings problem, although it's going to look like a feelings problem for the first few minutes, so stay with me. Here is the pattern. A founder gets a number. It could be revenue for the month, maybe a client who didn't renew, could be looking at the bank balance before payroll. And instead of treating that number as information, she treats it as a verdict. Low number means something about the business. It also somehow means something about her. Now, the second part is the problem, not because feelings are bad, because verdicts make worse decisions than data does. So watch what actually happens when a founder reads a bad number as a verdict instead of just information. She doesn't ask, what does this tell me about pricing? Or what does this tell me about lead flow or retention? She asks, what does this say about me? And once the question becomes about her, the decision making gets warped. It's pricing. A founder builds a proposal, knows what the work is worth, and then quietly takes 10% off before she even sends it. Not because the market told her to, because some part of her is pre-flinching from the rejection, and discounting in advance feels safer than hearing no at a full price. The verdict isn't that the market won't pay this. The verdict is if they say no, it means I'm not worth it. So then she protects herself from the verdict by never finding out. So let's talk about the hard client conversation. Revenue's down, a contract needs to be renegotiated, or a client may be underpaying for the scope they're actually using. Now, the founder who's treating the number as data picks up the phone. The founder who's treating it as a verdict avoids the call for 3 weeks because some part of her has decided that a bad number already proved something about her competence, and she doesn't want more evidence. And then there's the one that I think hits hardest for a lot of founders is the EBITDA conversation, whether that's with a buyer, an investor, or just herself at the end of the quarter. That number is supposed to be the cleanest, most neutral measure there is, just math. And it still gets treated like a referendum on her as a strategist. A bad quarter doesn't just say, hey, this input needs some adjusting. It says to the part of her brain still running the old wiring, you don't know what you're doing. This is the same number, wildly different weight depending on which question she's actually asking. 3 different decisions, all 3 bent by the same underlying confusion between what a number says about a business and what it says about a person. Now, I've done this more than once, and probably more recently than I'd like to admit. There have been months where someone asked me a simple question. What's your revenue doing? What's your EBITDA look like? And I can feel my whole body brace before I answer, not because I don't know the number. I know the number. I am a strategist. That's the job. I brace because some old wiring in me is convinced that whatever the number says, it's also going to say something about whether I know what I'm doing, whether I'm actually even qualified to be the person teaching this, whether I've quietly failed at the thing that I've built my name on. Now, that is absurd when I say it out loud. I built an entire framework on the idea that money is structure, not identity, and I still catch the verdict question running underneath my own numbers in real time on weeks where maybe things are tight. So if it happens to me doing this for a living, it is absolutely happening to you or someone you know. And you don't need to fix that about yourself before you're allowed to keep listening. So you just need to know that it's not unique to you. It is wiring, and wiring can be worked with. Now, this isn't a business problem originally. It's older than the business. Most of us inherited an equation somewhere along the way that net worth equals self-worth. We picked it up long before we had a P&L to apply it to. Money got treated less like a resource and more like a report card. The more you had, the more together and worthy of respect you apparently were. The less you had, the more those things were quietly in question. And nobody necessarily said that sentence directly. You just watched it play out in your family or in your social circle in a way certain people get talked about depending on how their year went. And we just filed it away as how things work. Now it gets louder once you own the business because there's no buffer left. When you work for someone else, a bad quarter, it belongs to the company. But when you build the thing yourself, the number stops feeling like an output and starts feeling like a mirror. There's nowhere for the verdict to land except directly on you. So here is your strategist's version of fixing this, because I'm not going to tell you to heal your relationship with money. We do that a lot on here. I'm going to tell you to separate two questions that have gotten fused together and start asking only one of them. What does this number say about my business? What does this number say about me? Only the first question is useful. The second one isn't even answerable because a number cannot evaluate a person. It can only evaluate input. So the verdict question doesn't announce itself as the wrong one. It just shows up first, really fast, before the useful question gets a word in. By the time you notice that you're spiraling, you've already made a defensive decision based on it. So the work isn't never ask a bad question. It's notice you asked it and then ask the other one anyway, even after the fact. So revenue dropped. The verdict question says I'm failing, but the data question says, did a client churn? Did pricing not hold? Did a pipeline dry up? The second question has an actual next move. I am failing does not. It's just a mood. So two founders get the same bad month. Founder one reads it as a verdict, spirals for a day or two, drops her price on the next proposal out of fear, maybe avoids that renewal call she actually needs to make. And founder two reads the exact same number as an input and gets curious instead of ashamed and pulls up exactly where the drop off happened, makes one or two targeted adjustments. Same bad month, completely different next 90 days. The gap is the entire argument for why this matters. Bad interpretation produces bad strategy, and it compounds. A founder who's been answering the wrong question for 5 years has made 5 years of decisions shaped by a verdict that was never true in the first place. It's a big part. So many founders stay stuck at earn or stuck at control and never make it to own or multiply, not because they lack the skill, but because they've been too busy managing a feeling to look directly at the thing that would move them forward. So here's the deeper reason this matters beyond any single month. If there is nothing stable underneath you privately, your numbers will always get recruited to do a job they were never built to do. You can learn to ask the right question about a bad month and still find yourself back at the verdict question 6 months from now, because the real problem was never only, which question am I asking about this number? It's what's actually holding you up when the number isn't there to do it. Your public life, the revenue, the growth, the way the business looks from the outside is only as ever strong as your private foundation, the home you've actually built, the roots you're standing on, the parts of your life that have nothing to do with what the business did this quarter. If that part is shaky, the public number gets pulled in to compensate, to prove you're safe, to prove you're enough, and it fails at that job every time, because that was never what that number was for. That's also, by the way, exactly why ask better questions about your numbers only gets you so far on your own. The questions are simple, but seeing your own pattern clearly enough to actually catch yourself in real time on your own numbers, that's the hard part, because you're standing too close to it. That's the whole reason an outside structural read on where you actually stand, not just emotionally, but architecturally, tends to move people faster than willpower or emotion ever does. So which founder are you going to be next time the number lands badly? Not abstractly, the next bad month, the next, again, renewal that you've been avoiding, the next quarterly number that makes your stomach drop before your brain catches up. So here's the discipline. You catch the verdict question before it finishes making decisions on your behalf, and you ask the only one that is actually useful. What does this number tell me about my business? Not about you, about the business. Simple to say, genuinely hard to practice, which is exactly why it's worth practicing on purpose. And build the part underneath it too. The foundation that has nothing to do with this quarter's number, that's not separate from the business work. It's what makes the business sustainable instead of something you're constantly bracing against. So here is your actual homework, and it takes 10 minutes. Pull up the last number that got under your skin, a slow month, the client who left, a quarter that maybe stung more than the math should have allowed. Don't relive how it felt. Just run the data question on it now, after the fact. What actually moved? Where did the drop happen? What does this tell you about the business, not about you? That's the whole practice. Done once on paper so that the next time it happens in real time, you've already built the muscle. And if you want help mapping out what your numbers actually say about where you are structurally, not just the quarter, that's exactly what the Wealth Strategy Blueprint is for. And I've got the link in the show notes for you, but we're going to keep coming back to this because once you can see the difference between a verdict and a data point, you start making better decisions across the board, not just with your money. All right, until next time, keep building.
If this lit something up, share it, review it, and get in the room. Join the Expand Your Empire community and start turning wisdom into wealth. You're not too late, and you're not doing this alone.